Most people are living like robots. They're simply repeating the patterns in their life, which were set there by their parents and family and the close influences in their life.
I don't care because I hate you.
And they call that freedom, but actually it's not freedom at all. We would never choose to suffer, yeah? We can't help it, actually. We're all conditioned to always go to the mind, always go to this me. And most people never really come in their whole lifetime to really look at that, to understand that.
In 2004, the English spiritual teacher Premananda and 20 people with a passionate longing for truth created a community together, Open Sky House. Since then, many people have come who discovered that in the ordinary society life, they have been lulled into accepting a robotic way of living. They sense that there are structures in their minds, created unconsciously over time, which cause them to suffer and to feel separate. Premananda's vision was to create a place where this freedom from the mind and from separation can be attained and brought into daily life, a place where spirituality is present in regular satsang meetings, retreats and meditations, as well as in everyday life. He encourages using all aspects of living, like work, creativity, and intimacy, as an opportunity to see these structures and the robotic nature of most of our actions. In this way, Open Sky House has become a self-sufficient community and runs several professional businesses, a guest house, a seminar business, an art gallery, and a publishing company, producing and distributing spiritual books and films. All of this takes place under one roof, as the community was lucky to find a beautiful 17th century mansion directly on the banks of the River Rhine, near Cologne in Germany. Every year, Premananda and the community hold a retreat in South India, at the holy mountain Arunachala, where the saint Ramana Maharshi spent most of his life. Open Sky House is an oasis of peace, as well as a lively international meeting place for people with a longing for truth. From inner stillness, creativity happens naturally through music, theatre, art, literature and dance. Seekers from all over the world come to visit as volunteers, guests, or to take part in the retreats. Through it all, the loving guidance from Premananda is available as a reminder to look inwards and find the source where true freedom resides. Many people come to the community in ways that they may not expect. Julia met Premananda by chance in Ukraine, and she had such a strong connection to true freedom that she decided to leave her fiancé, her job, and her country to follow a deeper calling.
I have idea about how spiritual teachers work with their student, but I don't really know.
The disciple goes through his own inner process in his life. So it's like something was building up inside you, you know? There was like some kind of fire, if you like, it's burning inside you. And when it got to a certain point, then you found me.
Next week we have a new art exhibition coming in. We have artists bringing the paintings and sculptures. So who could help with this? Santosh.
Yeah, I can help also.
Santosh, Amrit, and we need someone else.
I can help.
And you? Okay. We have 2 volunteers coming in. So we have Pedro from Madrid, and he arrives at Düsseldorf airport around 2. Who could pick him up?
Me?
Okay. Ingo then.
The point of our community is to try to help humanity become more conscious. And everything we're doing here is actually about energy. The biggest contribution that any human being can make is first to become free yourself. And what does that mean? It means to become free of your conditioned mind. When we're living in a more natural situation, when we're not so conditioned to be, if you like, in the knowledge, in the mind, in the knowing, then there's some different quality. And this quality is to do with our true nature, to do with the heart, to do with our being. We gradually got identified with something that's not true. Hence, the Great Misunderstanding. So this Great Misunderstanding is exactly this wrong identification, false identification. That's all it is. And once you know that, you've got it. Tara will make a film that will go with the Great Misunderstanding. It'll be called the Great Misunderstanding, yeah?
I think one of the great misunderstandings is about getting tied up in concepts.
And the problem is that over many, many years, we've grown up this sense of a separate somebody. It's like a theatre script, like a character. You come into the theatre and the director of the play gives you a script and says, okay, you're Bill. And so you do all the bits where Bill speaks, see? And somebody else gets the script for Jill, and she does all Jill's bits. And because they're actors, they know this is just a script, and they know that Bill or Jill is just the character for the play. And when they leave the theatre in the end of the practice or the end of the performance, and they go out of the theatre, then at least to some extent, they leave this particular character. But this character has happened inside us very, very gradually, very, very slowly, imperceptibly over many, many years. And so we don't ever really see it. We haven't seen that it's not really us, you see. We haven't seen that it's not really true. But it's no more than a kind of script that you would get in the theatre. And we've forgotten that it was given as a script, and we're playing the role. We've taken on the role. And because we're so busy playing this role, it prevents us seeing the essence of who we are.
But the paradox is that it's almost impossible to be as you are. And perhaps we came here with the idea that we would transform into somebody else. We would change into something else, something a bit better than before. Most of the time, we become identified with a story. And this story is based on a character we call me. And this story has been there for many years, so it became very familiar. This story was slowly created inside us, imperceptibly. We didn't really notice it. And sometimes we come into a harmony with that, and just for a moment or a few moments, we feel a deep sense of peace and oneness, as if everything suddenly is exactly as it feels it should be. Maybe you don't remember, but when you were lying in your mother's body, there was a sense of oneness. You wouldn't have had any sense of separation with your mother. And then one day, the great day arrives, and you pop out, and the cord is still connected. And almost immediately, the mother takes the baby on her body. So that little baby is not going to feel separate. Just oneness is there. Oneness with the mother, oneness with everything. At some point, there's a sense that here is me, and over there is mummy. And so this sense of separation begins. Somehow you have to get a sense of this conditioning, because if you don't think you're conditioned, you won't be prepared to do anything about it. You're identified with something that simply doesn't exist. You believe yourself to be something that simply doesn't exist. And while you hold on to that belief, while you're attached to that belief, you will certainly suffer through all kinds of situations. So if you want to step out of that suffering, then you need to wake up to what is true. It's the only gate, it's the only way out. There's only one way out. You can go to every single spiritual healer in the world, it won't help you. You can go to all the great psychologists, it won't help you. It'll make things maybe slightly easier, slightly better. Your life can be slightly smoother, But if you really want to step out, then you have to wake up to what is true. And what is true has always been true. There's no path, there's no staircase, there's no steps. It's right here now.
As Premananda works more closely with the residents of the community, it is clear that this message of being here now is not so simple to live in daily life. This is where the role of a master comes in. Someone who is clear about who they are, about what is true. The master acts as a mirror to show us that his essence and our essence are the same.
The master is not some kind of dangerous person to who you are. The master is a very dangerous person to who you're not. So of course he's very dangerous to your ego structures and to your habits. His whole job is to destroy all that. But he's not dangerous to you see. He's not dangerous to who you really are. Because he knows, and he's trying to show you so you know that you're the same, there's no difference. So there's nothing dangerous in that. But to your habits, to your structures, to your conditioned mind, he's a very dangerous guy because his whole work is to break through and to destroy it.
One day, the villagers in a small village were angry because a lion had been killing their chickens. So they decided that they were going to hunt down this lion. So they set out from the village and they killed the lion. They didn't know it, but this was actually a mother lion, and in the bushes there was a little baby lion. And after some time, a flock of sheep passed by. And they found this baby lion in the bushes, very unhappy, cold, shivering. And this flock of sheep told to the baby lion, "You can come with us." Sheep taught the lion how to eat grass. And also, of course, sheep go bah, and it wasn't very long before the lion was going bah, just like the sheep. The lion lived with this flock of sheep for some longer time, gradually getting bigger and bigger. And every day, like all the other sheep, the lion was busy eating grass and going bah. And naturally, he thought he was a sheep. Until one day, there was a wise old lion passing by, and he was hungry. So he came down towards this flock of sheep. And then he was amazed to see that there, amongst all these sheep, was a huge lion, acting very strangely. So this wise old lion came down through the flock of sheep, came down to this young lion, and pushed him down to the lake. He was right there by the water, and the young lion looked into the water and saw that his face was the same face as the lion. In that moment, he roared. This is a very beautiful story because this is actually our only real issue. If you understand this story, it's very clear and simple. We become identified to being a sheep when actually we're a lion.
it's just like you just need to expand. You need to make a bigger space for yourself in the world somehow. This inner feeling of, you know, I don't want to be a robot, I want to become awake, I want to know myself. When that gets very strong, then somehow existence brings you to choices. Like tonight you had this choice to do this rock band or not do it. And you jumped into it, and then something amazing happened. It was amazing for you, and it was amazing for everybody. You can surf to another level in your life just from that.
We're very much interested and used to surrendering to our ego. We don't even think about it. And the fastest way to give it up is to say yes. Yes, 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 yes. And of course that's extremely difficult, because we always come to something where we can't say yes. So when you don't say yes, you're basically saying yes to the ego. The thing to do is to allow this surrender. It's very threatening to surrender, because what you're doing is you're allowing yourself to dissolve. You're allowing your ego to deconstruct. The invitation basically is to live in a yes. And this feels like an expansion in the body. So things happen and you say yes. But when you become resistant, first of all you can feel it in the body, because there's a tightening. And almost certainly resistance is to do with some kind of no. And all this either overt resistance or passive resistance is always connected to some kind of inner structure. We have some structure inside us, and this structure causes us to automatically go into this resistance. Actually, it's all something we've created inside ourselves, but very often we are projecting this situation onto somebody else. When we say, you know, somebody made me angry, nobody makes you angry. It's not possible. You make yourself angry because something is touched inside you. Resistance is a beautiful possibility, because what happens with this journey of freedom is that on the journey you come to situations, and these situations touch some kind of program structure inside, and then you become resistant. There's a kind of great possibility in this moment when there's a lot of resistance. Unfortunately, what very often happens is that people then just kind of leave the situation. There's a big missed opportunity. And if you stay there in this resistance, and if you like work with this resistance, there can be a very big movement, a very big opening can happen out of this resistance.
What I would like to talk about is that I would say I trust you, with Premananda and what he's saying, but to do the step, no, there's the little steps I can do, but bigger steps often I can't do because the fear is too much, and how to...
Just take lots of small steps quickly.
Often. Then it's the same, no?
Yeah, then you'll get there, you know, instead of taking 3 big steps, you know, take lots of little ones and still you'll get there.
Yeah.
Everybody has to take their own pace, you know, their own... You know? It's all right, you know, you just take it as you can take it, you know.
There is much more possible. This I can feel inside. There's much more possible to get alive. No, I still have this feeling that I'm not.
Well, if you think it's possible, then you can take a step in that direction, whichever direction it is. Yeah?
Yeah.
And maybe you'll be surprised, when you...
Yeah.
I remember there was a mother, and she was telling me that she noticed that when she had her little girl, she made a kind of conscious decision that she didn't want to just pass on to her daughter the stuff that her mother had been passing on to her. And she told me that even though she had made this decision, and even though she was pretty vigilant, time and again she was able to see that actually she was just acting out pretty much exactly the way her mother used to act out towards her. And she was asking me, well, what can I do about that? I would like to tell you what the little girl would have liked to tell her mother. Just leave me alone for a bit. Love me, but give me space. I don't belong to you. Be touched that I'm in your hands for some time. And I understand there has to be some discipline. I understand there has to be some boundaries. I understand you have to take care that I don't run across the road or such things. But if you have some sense about satsang, if you have some sense about the truth of who we are, then there is a possibility that you can step back and not possess your child, not make your child into an extension of your ego.
One of the most powerful devices is just to stay alone. See, we're very used to relating. We're relating all the time with whole bunches of people in whatever situation. And just to be alone is very confronting.
In order to encourage this silence, Premananda created a retreat cellar as a place to go to be really alone. Food is regularly provided, and there is round-the-clock, heartful caring.
It's the intention to allow somebody to really confront their own silence, their own inner silence. And what tends to happen is that in the beginning your mind is very, very busy. Maybe it seems even busier than it would in the normal time. But as you stay longer alone, it's like the mind at some point starts to kind of give up. So this is very, very beautiful to discover, because if you're really honest, you'll see how much time you feel that you have to reach out. We're always reaching out to somebody, because we have the idea that this somebody is giving us something. We're getting something. We're getting hopefully good stuff, but we might be getting not so good stuff. And when you spend this time alone, you begin to see that actually all this talk of the self is absolutely true. That when you really stay alone, then what comes up inside is an enormous sense of well-being, of nourishment, of love. As we start to become quiet, as we start to meditate, we start also to look inside, and we realize that we can become aware of what's going on. And we can do this from the witness.
So the witness is there in the mind, and the witness is able to look inside and register whatever is happening. And we can also call this self-awareness. It's rather easy to look at what is happening for the other person. We do this all the time without really noticing. But to be self-aware, to know what is happening from moment to moment, takes some attention. And so creating this witness is a very important part of waking up. Finally, this witness itself needs to dissolve. But before we come to that point, we need to watch ourselves inside.
As you work alongside somebody, it doesn't take very long when you can get some sense of what's motivating the actions of that person. Once you begin to see the way they're acting and to see what is behind the way they're acting, then actually if the person you're working with is open, then you could give them some useful feedback. You could be a very effective mirror for them to understand how they function in a more clear way. It's quite easy to see how somebody else is operating. It's much more difficult to see your own patterns. So if we want to become really free, then at some point we need to have some better understanding about how we're functioning. And so because of this understanding, we decided to create what we call the buddy system. And you agree with your buddy that he's free to give you some feedback. That when he would see you doing some particular thing, then he would be giving you the feedback and you would be ready to accept the feedback because you were ready to understand better how you operate inside. And what we discovered with this buddy system was that it can be very helpful if you're really open to hear it. But we've discovered that it's very easy to slip back into the old pattern of being resistant to any kind of authority. So out of this resistance, we don't really welcome anybody to come and tell us that we're doing some particular structure. So in order to deal with that situation, we introduced into this system the idea that you would always thank your buddy. So your buddy comes along and says, there you are, you're doing your me thing as you always do. And then you say, thank you very much. I'm very pleased you told me that. Which you may not feel really, because unfortunately there's an immediate emotional reaction. When somebody gives you some information like that, usually we perceive it as negative. And usually we immediately resist it. We defend ourselves. The ego is always defending itself. Because these structures are, in fact, the structure of our ego.
So while I'm talking about the ego in terms of There's you, there's me. This is not really a true intimacy, because this is duality. This is making us two. And the true intimacy would be a meeting of essence. The big shift that can happen is that when we come to this moment when we realize that actually we're not a separate somebody.
Mother India, thank you for nourishing me, opening my heart, showing me your ancient wisdom, taking me to the masters, even giving me my name, Pramananda.
Every January, Pramananda conducts a retreat at Arunachala in South India. A chance to connect with the quality of devotion and spirituality in the Indian culture, and to meet Indian masters he has befriended during the years he lived in India.
Become an observer, a witness. You witness your thoughts, you witness the patterns of your behavior, and this completely changes everything. You start to understand this ego structure. You start to see your movie. And then what Ramana Maharshi is saying is that if you can go behind the mind, you can go behind this ego to the source, then something can happen and your whole life will be transformed. So he suggested something that we can also call self-inquiry. It's a 180-degree turn from always being outside, always being in the world. Instead of grabbing the thought, you go back to where does this thought come from? Some thoughts arise, and you ask yourself, from where do these thoughts arise? And the answer is, from me. And then you ask, who is this me? And that doesn't have really a verbal answer. It's just making a break. It's just making a break in this automatic grabbing of the I, attaching to the thought. In the beginning, you have to really do it. You have to make an effort. And he suggested in the beginning, you would sit down with your eyes closed, become quiet, and then start watching the thoughts. So in the beginning, it's a practice. In the beginning, it's an effort. Because the whole habit of our mind is something else. But you'll find that after some time of effort, then you can open your eyes, you can stand up, and you can take this remembering into your everyday life. You can start to be able to look all through the day. We have this exercise which could give you a taste of it, and a clear understanding that you're not this false sense of self. Because during this exercise, we're going to tell our partner who we think we are, and as you speak and as you speak and as you speak, you begin to see that everything you're saying out of your mouth is just nonsense. For some of you who are going to do this for the first time, maybe it'll be strong, very strong for you to see this. And there's a tremendous space. And maybe some thoughts are coming, but these thoughts are so far away, so faint, so much in the background, that these thoughts can't grab you anymore.
And you're just, in the foreground is this space, this beautiful space. So it's a beautiful way of melting, because in the end it's about love. It's just love. Everything actually is just love. I'm using the word love in the sense of a certain kind of energy. I could use the word consciousness. I'm not using the word love in the sense of I love you. Because as you fall into this understanding, you find that I love you is just ridiculous. I'm not talking about that kind of love. It's another kind of love. And this love is your essence. And when you're there in this essence, everything expands. Everything becomes light. As we're growing up in our families, we have our mummy and our daddy, and of course we idolize this situation. It fits nicely with our stories which we're told at bedtime and our fantasies about life, and so we create mummy and daddy into a kind of amazing something. And we keep this projection inside us for our whole life. Everybody's playing the same kind of projection game, and so you can say this is intimately part of life. Let's jump in and get some experience. And of course, in the whole process of it, you will have some good moments, you know, when you feel very, very happy. You know? For most people become happy for that kind of reason, you see, unfortunately. Come to a point when we absolutely clearly realize that this cycle of relationship is never going to satisfy this deep yearning inside.
Da da da
In the spiritual tradition, there's two approaches. There's the way of the heart, and there's the way of knowledge. The way of the heart in India is called bhakti, and in the way of knowledge is called jnani. It's kind of distinctly different. But of course, it comes to the same truth. And so in the way of the heart, it's a way of surrender. This separate personal me is constantly surrendered. Surrendered, if you like, into the fire. So with the way of the heart, it's constantly giving this separate me, giving it away. See, giving it away, give it away, give it away, into the fire. It's like dissolving the ego bit by bit. So part of this opening of the heart, we can use the word service, you see. When you give something in, and there's no return, you don't get paid, you don't get something back directly. You just give it for no reason. And in the end, when you come into this energy of service, again you find out that the result is you get an open heart. And the whole energy system opens up. The heart opens up, and you feel touched. And in that opening, this separateness, this ego, this separate me, it starts to dissolve, starts to deconstruct. So Amber, keeping your eyes closed and see what is going on inside. So look and find what is the strongest thing that's going on, and then bring your attention to that, whatever it is.
Through guided inquiry, a space arises where the person is less identified with thoughts and emotions. A movement towards the essence occurs.
And what happens now?
Soft falling.
So stay with this soft falling. Give yourself permission to just fall deeper inside. And what's happening now?
Nothing.
So stay with what you're calling nothing. Okay, so when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
You have to ask yourself the question, who am I? This investigation will lead in the end to the discovery of something within you which is behind the mind. Solve that great problem, and you will solve all other problems.
The clouds of the mind part, and you have a clear glimpse of your true nature. And this can happen just for a moment, or it can happen for a longer time. And normally it tends to dissipate, and you come back into your familiar story, your familiar you. At some point in your life you had a glimpse, it was very beautiful, you were very touched, and this is, in a way, changed the course of your life because it's made you understand a possibility that you didn't know existed before. And the glimpse is so beautiful, so amazingly blissful, that it's impossible to ignore it. And so if that happens, and it can just happen for no reason at all, then that's going to be a life-changing happening. There is this aspect of I'm doing the painting, and this is normally how we see ourselves.
To find the line, it's like a searching, drawing, you search.
But if you get involved in any kind of creative pursuit, you come at some time to discover the possibility that this me, this my, who seems to be doing everything, actually doesn't exist. And that you can do it better without it. And if you look at great art from famous masters, then you can be pretty sure that they were in that space all the time when they were making that particular art. Spiritual people a lot talk about, oh, I had a spiritual experience. And the daily life is full of thoughts, full of our conditioned robot, and then something opens, and maybe we've just finished a meditation, or we've been sitting quietly, something happens, and suddenly, for some shorter time, maybe it's just a few minutes, maybe a few hours, we experience complete silence, and we say, oh, I had a spiritual experience. All the stuff that changes, which is what you normally call my life, that is an experience because it's constantly changing. And our work is to find what never changes. Is to stay with what never changes. And where you want to be is home. And home is not bricks. Home is your own being, your own being. It's a beautiful feeling, such a beautiful feeling when you're completely home inside yourself. Because when you're really home inside yourself, there's no desire. There's no desire, because What it means to be at home is that you're content. And desire is always coming out of a sense that something is not okay. And then you desire to change it to something else. And the way to cut this game is to come back inside, come to yourself, come to the self. You can just enjoy whatever you want to enjoy. You don't have to be Picasso, you don't have to be the greatest musician. You can just play the flute because you'd like to play the flute. You know? And I must say that in the last years in the community, I'm very touched because this has happened for many people. Suddenly they discover they can play the piano, or they like to dance, or whatever it is. More and more we have energy for theatre, dance, music, clay modelling, painting. And it's like just something very natural that if you come to understand, you realize that the only thing left is to have a good time. We have some funny ideas that, you know, the whole effort of going to freedom or going to enlightenment is an effort to get something special that we don't have now, you know. That's why the effort is worth it. And actually it's not like that. You just get back what you've got now, you see. It doesn't change. It does change in another way because the perception changes from inside. And that makes the difference, a huge difference. Because the difference is that you can accept life as it is. You can laugh at it, of course. Maybe I laugh more than I used to laugh about it. Can you imagine living without all this constant suffering? All these worries, all these jealousies, all these fears? Can you imagine what it could be like when they all just fall away? You're free of all this nonsense. You just don't care about that because it doesn't grab you anymore. You see. There isn't anybody to be grabbed because you've dropped the identification with the person who had all this stuff. The difference between a glimpse and self-realization is that self-realization is permanently clouds have disappeared. What happens then is that the identification with the separate false self is seen and understood and drops away completely.
Lakshmi, who has been intensely involved with Premananda and living in the community for 5 years, had a strong, energetic shift while sitting at her computer in the office. This is traditionally called a satori. Satori is the sudden flashing into consciousness of a new truth. It's a perfectly normal state of mind. All mental activities will now work to a different key, more joyful and peaceful than ever before. Spiritually, it is a new birth. Intellectually, it is the acquiring of a new viewpoint. The world appears as if dressed in a new garment.
There was enormous energy going, especially in the arms. I had cramps in my arms, I couldn't move the arms, and then the whole body was like on an electric chair. Yeah? I didn't have any control anymore over my body. Yeah.
Awakening and self-realization is not exactly what you might imagine it to be. So when this false identification suddenly, boom, is gone, because it goes in a moment, then you're left feeling very vulnerable. So although you're completely supported by existence and taken care of by existence, in the same moment you feel very strange because your perception of life and of the world, it suddenly changes.
I had the feeling I was very much supported, and it was really, really beautiful, really beautiful.
I didn't feel like it was happening to Lakshmi or someone. It just was happening. Something was happening, and it wasn't personal. It was something happening.
We think it's all happening like we think it's happening, yeah? But we don't know anything, yeah? And that makes it so clear that suddenly is this energy sort of like chung, going into your body, yeah? And you don't have any control, yeah? It's just sort of a happening, yeah? It's just, and yeah, what is it, yeah? Where does it come from? Where does it, I mean, and I think this is one thing from the Open Sky House, yeah? Even, I mean, I still can't explain from the mind what makes sense there or not, yeah? I mean, it's very difficult to explain, yeah? I mean, when volunteers come or people ask, I often don't know what to say, yeah? What are we doing here, yeah? What the fuck is going on, yeah? Oh, yeah. But what I can say, it works, yeah? However it works, yeah? And I can see that when you get in the energy, it all falls away by itself. Yeah? If you just throw yourself in the energy. Yeah? There may be people who can do it themselves, I don't know. Yeah? I can clearly say I couldn't. And I think it's very difficult. You must be somehow, I don't know how you get in your corners, which you always avoid. How do you get there? And how do you know that they are there? Yeah? How do you know? And who is telling you? Yeah?
There's this very famous story about the king, yeah? And this king was getting old, and he was a bit tired of running this kingdom. So he decided that he announced to the whole population of his kingdom that on a certain date there would be a huge party at his palace, and everybody was invited. And when you came to this party in the palace, the king was sitting quietly in some inner room, and he'd announced that the first person that came to this king, he would give that man his whole kingdom. Anyway, there was a big party, you know, beautiful food, music, entertainment, gorgeous singers, you know, the whole thing was a kind of lavish feast. And after a few hours, nobody had approached the king. He was still sitting quietly inside the palace. So he called, you know, his prime minister or somebody, and he asked the prime minister, you know, I'm sitting here, I've invited my whole kingdom to come here tonight, and I'm ready to give to the first man the kingdom. What happened? And the prime minister says, well, they're enjoying the food. They're enjoying the music, and you know, they've completely forgotten about the whole kingdom being available. And this is a very kind of ancient story, and of course this illustrates beautifully why we get caught up in the less essentials. For example, I have a room with windows onto the Rhine, and it's like I'm completely touched looking out of this window. I've looked out of this window hundreds of times because I've lived in that room for 6 years, I think. And I'm always touched when I look out of the window. The seasons are always changing, and the trees are always a bit different, and the sunset's a bit different, and the ship's a bit different, and the river, the level of the river is a bit different. It's always changing, it's always alive, it's always something
to touch me, you see. It's like in every ordinary thing, you know, it's like amazing. The whole quality of life changes. You're constantly touched for no reason. The reason, it's already enough to be breathing, to be seeing, to be hearing. It's already enough to celebrate. But our life itself is already enough to celebrate. There doesn't need to be anything special, because everything comes to celebration. But it's not like a special celebration. This is such a gift. Everything actually becomes a celebration. And so every ordinary little thing is something to celebrate, because there's nothing special. There's tremendous innocence. There's no body. There's nobody there. There's no ideas, you know. It's just like life, you know, pure life. It's like all the chains are cut. From exactly one moment to the next moment, suddenly you feel completely released.